Hello and welcome to this week's video, and this one will be all about knitted garment constructions. If you're a beginner and if you feel overwhelmed and don't know what construction to choose, what construction even means, and what constructions exist, then you will find a lot of value here. If you are someone who already did experiment with knitting jumpers or sweaters and you are still not sure what all of those elements of the garment do to your actual garment, then you will find lots of useful information and tips in this video. I do have a presentation ready for you, so stay tuned. We are gonna see actual examples and understand what constructions exist, which one to choose, what fabric works for every construction, and so on. And I want to briefly mention that today I want to talk about everything that you could wear on your shoulders, so jumpers, sweaters, tops, cardigans. We will also be talking about vests and sleeveless designs, so if you are planning on knitting any of those things, you will find this video helpful. I will only be covering contiguous constructions, so where you basically knit in the round the whole piece, and not the constructions where you knit different elements individually and then sew them together. And just for this discussion to be easier and more understandable, we will only be focusing on top-down knitting. So if I'm mentioning that I'm knitting the neckline first, that's because I am normally doing the top-down method for all of my knits. So what is the garment construction? Well, basically the garment construction is how your stitches make up a wearable garment. So how do you shape, for example, your yoke? How do you increase for sleeves, for example? How do you shape the neckline? How do you pick up stitches? All of those things are actually construction elements, and we will be covering the most important ones today. Why I think it's really important for you to know what the construction is and how it can alter your garment is because if you know how all of those things make up a complete garment, then you know how modifying every single individual one of those elements will affect the overall fit, the design, the look. If you understand garment construction quite well, then only by looking at a knitting pattern you can understand whether it will look good, whether it will fit your body, whether, for example, your sleeves will be comfortable or the body is of the ease that you want it to be. Let's first discuss about what knitted garment elements there exist and why every one of this is important. So what is your average jumper or sweater or any basically top-down construction? What is it made of? Well, the first element that makes the sweater is your neckband, and normally this is knitted in some kind of a rib, and this is not only a design element but is actually a very important construction element, because if you think of a sweater that you wear on your shoulders, your neckband is basically what holds everything together. For example, if your neckband is too loose, then it stretches and the whole sweater stretches down under its weight. So the neckband is a very important element here, and some people prefer to do their neckband at the end, so they would start with a cast on, continue knitting, and then come back, pick up the stitches and do their neckline. I personally do prefer starting with the neckband if that's an option for a construction that I'm working on. The next element that I feel like this one gets forgotten like 95% of the time, and that is neckline shaping. And if you learn just one thing from this video, I wish this could be the neckline shaping. Just to give you an idea of what neckline shaping is. So if you take a look at this jumper, back neckline is way higher than the front one. And this is how you know the garment will be comfortable to wear. Because if you have no shaping, and for example, you have just casted on your stitches and did your raglan, for example, without any neckline shaping, what happens is that your back neckline sits at the same level as your front neckline. And I'm actually wearing a t-shirt today that shows you pretty nicely how the correct neck shaping should look like. So if you're wondering, well, how deep should my shaping be? Like, how deeper should my front neckline be than my back one? So here's your answer. If you just place a finger at the base of your neck, you will find you have kind of like an indentation here, like right where the bone starts. So this is where your front neckline should be positioned, around that area. And then if you touch the back of your neck, eventually you will find that you have like a bump here right at the base of the neck, and this is basically where your back neckline should sit. And if I, for example, find both of those points again, can you see the height difference between these 2 points? It is like, for adults, it is normally around 5 centimeters, and this is the difference that you should have between your back neckline and your front neckline. What neckline shaping does is it creates, first of all, this curve at the back and this rounded shape at the front of the neckline. And second thing it does is that if calculated and done properly, it lowers the front part of the neckline significantly so that it sits right where it should be and right where it feels comfortable when you wear it. Normally this is done with short rows, and if you want to know from just one look at the pattern if the garment will sit comfortably or not, just see if it has enough of the neck shaping or not. Then after we are done with the neckline shaping, we start working at the yoke. And basically yoke is the part of the garment where the majority of the increases happen. Your finished bust circumference depends on how you do your yoke increases. How comfortable are your sleeves? Like, are they wide enough for you to feel comfortable wearing the garment? This is all included and made in the yoke area. Basically, the yoke starts where your front neckline ends, where your neckline shaping ends, and stops at the underarm. And basically, underarm is where we separate for the body and for the sleeves, and we do cast on a few stitches for the underarm, as we say. And why we do that? Because if you think of it, before you were knitting this bell-shaped garment, and now it basically hugs you right from the outside. And now to create the actual body and the sleeves, we will need to add some stitches to make sure that this width, so the width of our underarm, is basically there, and we don't get any of that weird like pulling and creasing that we sometimes do. If you were ever wondering what your ideal underarm should be, just take a piece of paper, place it under your arm, and go ahead and draw 2 lines like at the base of your arm, and then measure the distance that you get. And that is your ideal underarm that will feel comfortable, will not restrict the arm movements, and so on. I would say the main difference in construction side of the garment happens in this yoke area. Then when we are ready with our yoke, we will continue with our sleeves and with our body. And talking about the body, how loosely your garment sits actually depends on the width and the ease of the body itself. And let's talk a bit more about what ease is. So we can say that we roughly categorize ease into 4 different groups, and the first one is negative ease. And the negative ease basically means that the garment that you have made is actually smaller than your body, so it hugs you really snugly. We normally use negative ease for gloves, for hats, for socks. Some tank tops do have negative ease, and that is because we don't want, for example, our glove falling off when we wear them, or we don't want our socks falling off our legs. So because the knitted fabric stretches quite a lot, we can knit a piece of fabric that is actually smaller than we need, so that it stretches when put on your leg, for example, and it sits nicely where we want it to sit without moving. The next 3 groups are all positive ease. First one is the fitted garment category, and these are your turtlenecks, for example. These are all of those undergarments that you would, for example, wear underneath a jumper, let's say, if it is really cold outside. So this is actually your first layer. You can, for example, wear a blazer on top. You can sometimes wear a cardigan on top of the fitted garment that you're wearing. And hand knitting is not very suitable for knitting fitted garments, and we will talk about this a bit later in the video. The next category is the relaxed fit category, and I will say this is my favorite one. This is your normal everyday casual jumper or your everyday casual t-shirt that you're wearing. So this is a very comfortable fit. It has around 4 to 10 centimeters of positive ease, so the circumference of the finished garment is, for example, 8 centimeters bigger than the circumference of your bust. When we are talking about ease, we're always comparing the garment with the garment circumference with the circumference of our bust. I prefer the relaxed fit because you can always wear this jumper, for example, underneath a coat or a jacket, and at the same time it allows you to wear, for example, a t-shirt underneath it, as you can see in the picture on the left. So this is a really versatile garment, really casual one, and this can actually look great in a more elegant look, for example, if you wear it with a pair of really classy trousers. So really versatile fit that I, for example, love. The next category is a hugely popular group, and that is oversized fit garments. And this is when you have more than 13 or 15 centimeters of positive ease in your garment. These are your boyfriend jumpers. These are your oversized blanket inspired garments, and beginners are really attracted to this garment because these are normally knitted on quite a large needle size and with quite a thick yarn, and it can create an impression that this kind of project is way easier than, for example, more fine yarns that you would use, for example, to knit your relaxed fit jumpers. One problem with these ones, they tend to be really hot. They include alpaca or mohair, and you cannot comfortably wear them when you have, for example, heating on in the room that you're in. These garments are quite complicated to wear underneath a coat or a jacket, a winter jacket, because they're quite bulky and you have thick fabric that creates all of those folds that, you put your coat on top of it and it sits quite, funky. So this is not my preferred style, but I know it's really popular right now. And a lot of the patterns that you we'll see released, very popular patterns, are in this oversized fit. And I think we will find why as we discuss the topic of the constructions more in this video. Let's talk about constructions. What kind of constructions do we have? And I would say, no matter what you tell me, that there are 4 contiguous constructions that exist. It is your classic raglan, your classic diagonal normal raglan. It is a saddle shoulder that is somehow similar to the raglan in how it's made, but I would still say this is a different category. The next one is your round yoke. Think about all of this colorwork, Norwegian, Scandinavian patterns. And then there is diagonal or European shoulder, sometimes it's called Japanese shoulder. From the front, it looks like you have a normal satin sleeve, but this is actually a continuous construction. So let's talk about the first one. Let's talk about the raglan. Basically, what is happening in the yoke of a raglan is you would knit it in the round and increase for the sleeve and for the body at the same time. You will have a line that will guide your increases for the sleeve and for the body. So basically you will increase pretty much in the same place for your body and for your sleeve. So what you end up with is this diagonal line that goes from your neckline to your underarm and has all of those increases nested next to it. And raglan is great for all of those casual jumpers that you will wear every day. Beginners find this construction quite easy because the things that you do are quite repetitive and you can memorize the pattern quite easily and just knit, enjoy, and then wear your garment. And a lot of people find that raglan fits their bodies quite well. So I think raglan is the most popular construction out there. The next construction that I wanted to mention is the saddle shoulder construction. And I would say this follows the logic of the classic raglan quite a lot, with a single difference, that the increases are not made for the sleeves and for the body at the same time, but the line that guides the increases still exists. The main feature of the saddle shoulder is that strip of fabric that you have on the top of the shoulder that has all of your increases for the body, and that then becomes your sleeve. So what you will do, you will knit this construction in the round. You will start increasing in every round until you reach the end of your shoulder, and then you will stop increasing for the body and continue only increasing for the sleeve along the same line basically. But because of how the increases are placed, your raglan line, your increase line, will make a turn at the end of your shoulder, and then when we pretty much reach the underarm, what we will do is that we will curve this increase line once again by doing a few more increases for the body just to accommodate for the bust. So this is your saddle shoulder. One thing I want to say about both the raglan and the saddle shoulder, that your neckline shaping is so important here, because if you don't include the neckline shaping, what you will get is basically this rectangular neckline that I don't think you want. So what happens is, because you don't have the actual shaping, the raglan line pulls on your neckband and basically creates this rectangular shape at the base of your neck that I don't think you want. And I find that a lot of patterns for raglan and saddle shoulder unfortunately don't include that much of the neckline shaping, which might become a very unpleasant surprise when your jumper doesn't fit you as you wanted it to. The next construction type is your round yoke, and as I said, think Scandinavian coloring jumpers. What is happening here is that your increases are happening in a fan-like manner, so those are distributed throughout your yoke. And because the increases are distributed quite evenly throughout the yoke, you don't get the same problem here with the neckline becoming like of a weird shape. But if you want your round yoke to fit you nicely, it is really important for the increases to be calculated in the correct manner, because if you take a look at the top part of your body, this is where the majority of the increases should be happening, because we should have enough space for our shoulders to fit. So basically your round yoke should look more of like a semi-circle than the bell shape. So you don't want this bell triangular shape, because this will create all these folds on top of your yoke that I don't think you want. Calculating the actual length of your yoke, so the depth of your yoke, is very important here. And one thing to note about round yoke is that out of every construction that we talk about today, this one is the least anatomically suitable. So basically this is just a circle that you put on top of your shoulders. Normally all of these round yokes are quite oversized, and they are worked in quite a thick yarn so that the fabric does not show all of those construction issues. And the last construction type, and the most overwhelming, I would say, and the one that I have so many questions to, is a European or diagonal shoulder. And if you've never seen it, it looks like your normal set in sleeve as I have in here from the front, but from the back you have this diagonal line that then goes down into the underarm and forms the sleeve. So the actual seam is not placed on top of the shoulder as it normally happens, but it is placed diagonally at the back of the shoulder. So what is happening with the European shoulder? You cannot start knitting it from the neckband, so it is always the cast on edge that you start with, and you start with knitting the back piece first. So basically you would work your back piece until you reach the underarm separately, then you would cast on for the front, knit that one separately back and forth until you reach the underarms, and then connect everything in a single piece. So this basically becomes a contiguous construction from the underarms. But anyways, you will cast on this long line that will include both of your diagonal shoulders and the back of your neckline. Then you will work short rows back and forth just to form this triangular shape for the back. And when you are done with the back yoke, you will cast on the stitches for the shoulder along the shoulder lines, and will continue knitting these pieces separately, increasing and shaping the front neckline. Then when you're done with the two sides, you will continue knitting the front back and forth until you reach the underarms, then connect for the body and continue from there, knitting in the round. And this construction actually comes from the industrial knitting machine world. So this construction was created for the knitting machine to be able to create seamless knitted garments, and this, if calculated correctly, can result in a really nice, elegant, tailored look. So if you want that garment with none or very little positive ease, so the one that you will wear underneath all of your oversized jumpers or anything like that, the European shoulder is the most anatomically correct construction out there, but I would say it is on the advanced side. Now that we know a little bit about every construction, let's try and compare them. And first, I want to start by comparing all these constructions depending on how anatomically correct they are constructed. And as we have just discussed, the most anatomically correct construction is the European or diagonal shoulder. Then I would put the saddle shoulder, just because of the way that it follows this shoulder line that we naturally have. Then I would say it is the raglan, that you can still have a nicely fitting relaxed jumper knitted in raglan construction. And then the round yoke is the simplest of them all. This is just a cone with a hole for the head. And because of these features that all of these construction have, we could say that the more anatomically correct the construction is, the more fitted garment we can get out of it, and the more simple the shape is, and the less it kind of follows the natural curves of our bodies, the more oversized the garments are. And this is where I think we can discuss this popularity of oversized garments. The more oversized your garment is, the less complicated design and fit elements it should include. We do not expect oversized garments to follow the natural shape of our bodies. They should be like a really nice warm blanket on top of our shoulders. We do not expect the oversized garment to actually fit our bodies perfectly. This is just something that sits on top of you to give warmth and comfort, not elegance. The more fitted, the more anatomically correct your garment is, the more fine fabric you can work with. And if you were shopping, for example, for knitting patterns, you maybe saw that the European shoulder, and I'm talking here about nicely fitted European shoulder, not the oversized version, it is normally not knitted in a very thick yarn. On the other side of the spectrum, your round yoke that is quite oversized is normally knitted in a thicker yarn. Now, talking about the skill level that you need to have to work on any of this construction, I would say the simplest of them all is your classic raglan construction. This one, as I have already mentioned, is quite easy. The increases are quite repetitive, so if you know how to make one left and make one right, you can get a beautifully fitting raglan sweater. Then there is the round yoke. If you you come across a really nicely calculated round yoke that has your actual body shape in mind and does not feature very complicated color work, then the round yoke is quite easy. You just basically make creases as you knit in the round, and that's it. I would say the saddle shoulder and the European shoulder require some more skills and experience, first of all, to make sure they fit nicely so that you could adapt the actual pattern to your personal body shape. If you want to calculate your garment from scratch, these two are the most complicated ones. These are the most complex one. Normally, you cannot just remember the pattern and knit. You need to follow the actual numbers to make sure it fits you nicely. And now for the depth of the yoke that you get with all of these 4 constructions, the deepest yoke is for your round yoke and then your raglan construction. And this is something that I would like to pinpoint once again. You need to make sure that your yoke is deep enough, but not too deep to start creating all of those disturbing folds that we sometimes get. For the saddle shoulder and the European shoulder, if we're not talking about a hugely oversized fit, normally the yoke is a bit shorter and more tailored to your actual body. And this is not to say that you cannot create a raglan that would be nice and fitted, or you cannot create a European shoulder that is hugely oversized. We are talking about where, like, in what positive ease all of these constructions shine the most. So now that we know about all these constructions, and I am sure you are looking for a new pattern to work on, I want to quickly mention a few red flags for any yoke construction and any knitting pattern. And all of those red flags are basically based on what we have already discussed. And the first one is no or very little neck shaping. As I have already mentioned, we unfortunately are limited and have to work with our bodies, with our anatomy. So if there is no neckline shaping in the actual pattern and you don't know how to calculate and include it in the pattern yourself, I would say do not go for that pattern. The second red flag is no or very small underarms. So look for that place in the pattern that says separate the body and the sleeves and cast on additional stitches. See how many stitches you need to cast on, and if it features 2 underarm stitches, I would say that is too little. As I said, measure the actual underarm. You can go a bit smaller than that, but I would recommend keeping at least 70%, 70 to 80% of your actual underarm for the actual garment to feel comfortable and you to not feel restricted in your arm movements. The next red flag is no clear calculations for yoke depth in rows and centimeters. I know quite a lot of designers that only indicate the length, the depth of their yokes in centimeters. I know some that only indicate them in rows, and I would say both are really important because gauge is a really personal thing and you need to know if you're on point not only row-wise but also length-wise. So to make sure you do not get a very tightly fitting yoke that restricts your movements and does not look good, make sure to check if there are yoke measurements in centimeters and rows. Another red flag for me is the lack of construction overview. Especially as a beginner, it is really important to you to understand how this knitting will be going. Like, what are the actual logical steps that you will be following in knitting this particular garment? Do you start with a cast on edge? Do you start from the bottom? Do you work the pieces separately? When do you sew them together? So a really big green flag for me is the construction overview at the beginning of the pattern that basically walks you through what you will be doing to create this garment really briefly without any particular calculations, just saying you that you will do this, that, and that. So another red flag that I am always on the lookout for is no clear positive ease indicated in the pattern. I would say because we always pay attention at the actual designer wearing the garment, it is really important that the positive ease that exists in that photo is indicated. The best practice here is for the designer to leave their bust circumference and the circumference of the actual garment that they are wearing, so that you can see how that actual positive ease looks like. Then look for the recommended positive ease indicated in the pattern and choose your size from there. The final red flag for this video is the lack of finished garment measurements in the actual pattern. And I really like when these finished garment measurements are given in a little chart at sometimes the start, sometimes the end of the actual pattern, so that every time when I'm not sure if I'm on the right track and if my garment is of the size that I plan it to be, I can reference those measurements easily. That is it about deconstructions for today. I did not want it to be a very in-depth video. I believe that every one of these constructions deserve a really deep dive into tips, problems, red flags, green flags, and there is a lot to talk about every single one of them. Let me know what construction intimidates you the most, or what would you like to experiment with. If you are a beginner and I could give you one advice, I would say start with a relaxed fit classic raglan top-down jumper. This is my sincere recommendation that will save you a lot of nerves. And if you are a more experienced knitter, do experiment with all of these different constructions. Do try to modify the existing knitting patterns so that they fit you better, because this is why we do all of this knitting. This is why we don't like buying those things from the store. It is because we can customize everything that we want, and I believe that by knowing the construction and how all of the elements work together, you can create the garment that fits your own body. If you want to get predictable results and predictable fit every single time, knowing about what construction is and how it affects all of those things is really important. Do leave your struggles below. What elements of the garment construction do you struggle with most in the comments below, and I will be happy to talk more about those and maybe share my thoughts, experience, and knowledge on those things.